Okay, Shalom Aleichem everyone, and we are continuing here in the weekly Parsha, PARSHAS CHUKAS. So much to speak about. I want to focus on something from the beginning of this Parsha, which speaks about the PARAH ADUMAH, the red heifer, which is a very interesting mitzvah. A person is what's called tamei meis. They are afflicted with tumah impurity because they came in contact with a corpse or the like. And in order to purify them, we take the PARAH ADUMAH, the red heifer, we burn it, we take the ashes, we put it into water, and then sprinkle the water onto the person who has become tamei, become impure, and it purifies them. And they no longer have the impurification that came along with touching of that corpse. Now Rashi writes over here, why should it be that a PARAH ADUMAH, that this red heifer, which again is tamim, is perfect, doesn't have any other colored hairs besides red, and a yoke never went on its neck, it never worked a single day in its life. It's a very miyuchadik, a very unique and special kind of a parah, a cow, that you will not find anywhere else. It was rare to have a true PARAH ADUMAH, and that's why it was so holy and consecrated and able to purify the person who was impure. But Rashi writes over here, why specifically a PARAH ADUMAH? There are many other ways that we find in the Torah that people have their levels of purity come back to them. Whether it is the korbanos, the sacrifices they bring, whether it's the immersion in a mikveh that they go to, so on and so forth. Why over here? When it comes to tumas meis, to the impurity of a dead body that one came in contact with, why do you need the PARAH ADUMAH? And Rashi says like this, Mashal, let me give you a mashal, a parable. Leben shivcha shetinei paltin shel melech. You have a ben shivcha. You have the son of a maidservant who ended up sullying up, he dirtied the palace of the king. Amru, so they tell her, the mother of this child, who herself is a maidservant, let her come and clean up the waste and the mess that her son made. Kach tavoi parah, so too, here's the nimshal, here's the mashal that we're describing. Let the parah, let the cow, the red heifer come, Utechaper ala egel, and be mechaper, it should atone for the sin of the chet ha'egel, the sin of the golden calf. Says Rashi, I'm going to give you a parable, and if you understand the insight and the depth of this parable, you will understand clearly why HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose in His infinite wisdom. There's a special mitzvah called purifying the one that has tumas meis, that has impurity coming through a dead, and bring about the PARAH ADUMAH. That will solve all the problems. What should you do? Says Rashi, just like if you'd have a maidservant in the palace of the king, whose little son came around and started making a mess and dirtied everything up, turned over some cups, turned over a trash can, colored on the walls, and made a big mess in the king's palace. And the king obviously is not very happy about that. What a disgrace to the king. What a bizoyin, what a shame of his covet, of his honor, of his glory. You don't do that in the king's palace. So they announce, let the mother of this child come to the king's palace right now and clean up his mess. And so the mother comes, she's horrified that her son could do such a thing in the king's palace. That's what he's going to do. And she comes there with all of her cleaning utensils, the mop and the broom and the shmatas and the Windex and all the different cleaning agents, and she comes and she cleans up the mess of her son. And now everything, Baruch Hashem, back to normal. Says Rashi, so too is the same thing. When Klal Yisrael came to Har Sinai, and they received the Aseres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments, and then they lose track of when Moshe Rabbeinu is going to come down from the mountain of 40 days. They go into national hysteria. They end up going to Aaron HaKohen and say, no, do something for us. We need another God over here in this world. And Aaron HaKohen says, well, bring me all your gold. We'll see what's going to happen. He's trying to buy time, of course, as we know. He throws the gold into the fire, and out pops a egel azav, a golden calf. And then the people start dancing around the golden calf. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very disappointed in the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from Har Sinai. He sees them dancing around this calf. He throws down the luchais, the tablets, and Hashem says, Yasher koichacha kasher shibarta. You are good, Moshe Rabbeinu, that you broke the luchais. These people don't deserve it. And therefore, what ends up happening? It's the end really of Klal Yisrael. They just destroyed whatever levels they had reached when they were at Har Sinai. Says Rashi, so therefore comes along the Parah Adumah. It's like the mother of this child. The Parah Adumah is the cow, and the Egel Azav is the calf, and therefore let the mother of this calf come along and clean up the mess that the Jewish people made with the dancing around the golden calf, and therefore there will be a kapara, there will be an atonement to the sin of the golden calf. What does one have to do with the other? It's a beautiful mashal. However, what does the Parah Adumah, giving purity to a person who became impure by touching a corpse and a dead body, how does that rectify the sin of the Egel Azav, of the golden calf? What does one have to do with the other? This is not my question. This is really the question of the Maharal in his beautiful commentary of the Gur Aryeh. And the Maharal says like this, V'im Taimar, if you want to ask this question, the Ma'inyan Parah Adumah, what does the whole concept of the Parah Adumah have to do? Shimateres tumas meis, which comes along to purify the impurity of a mace, of a dead body. L'chaper al ma'isa egel. What does it have to do with the ma'isa egel, with the golden calf? It has nothing to do with each other. Which is what our question, which is really, this is the question of the Maharal. What does one have to do with the other? And he writes, fascinating idea. The yesh l'taretz, you can answer in the following way. The ilu loichatu be'egel, if Klal Yisrael never would have sinned with the Egel Azav, with the golden calf, by the foot of Har Sinai 40 days after they received the Esaras Adibas, the 10 Commandments, so then Hayuchayim la'olam, they would have lived forever and ever and ever. They never would have died after that. Kedisa be'per kamad avodah zarah, like we find in the Gemara of avodah zarah. Those of you that are learning Daf Yomi, only a week or so ago we learned this Gemara together. Amar Rabbi Yosi le'kiblu Yisrael es ha'torah ela shelo yishloit be'malach hamavis. The reason that Klal Yisrael received the Torah is so that the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, should no longer rule and reside over them. What does that mean? That means that once that they would receive the Torah in Har Sinai, so whatever reason there was death in the world up until this time, it all goes off and they're no longer going to die. Now we'll have to discuss that. However, once that they sin with the Chet HaEgel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Chavaltem Maseichem, your actions have destroyed you. Achein Ka'adam Tamusun, and therefore man is certainly going to die once again. Ulefikach, and therefore, Hamisi Chet HaEgel Ba'atzmai, Misa, death in the world, comes about as a result of the sin of the golden calf. That's why Hashem said, let the mother, the Parah Adumah, come along and purify a person from the sin of becoming tamei meis, of coming in contact with the dead body. That's why the Parah Adumah is able to come along and purify. Meaning, since that Klal Yisrael would have reached a level where they no longer required Misa, no longer required death in this world, and they would have lived on forever, for all of eternity, once that they received the Torah. However, when they fell into the tribulations of the Chet HaEgel, by dancing around the calf, they were punished. And whatever level that they were on, they went down from, and they're once again going to have to die. So the Chet HaEgel brought Misa, brought death into this world. That means that every person who Rahmanul Islam will end up passing from this world, it's a result of the Chet Egel. Now you have a person who came in contact with Tumas Meis. He touched a corpse, which means a person died as a result of the Chet Egel. Now the person themselves is Tameh, they're impure. They want to be purified. So what's going to purify them? The Parah Adumah, the ashes and the water of the red heifer. So therefore say Chazal, the way that Rashi is quoting it over here, and that is, let the mother come along and clean up the mess of her child. The child over here being the Egel Azav, the golden calf, who ended up disgracing the Rabbi Shalom, brought Misa back to this world. The mother now cleans up the mess. The Parah Adumah has the koyach, has the ability to purify from the impurities of Misa, of death. That's the way the Maharal explains, a beautiful, fascinating insight. But why would it have been that there would not have been death in the world after the receiving of the Torah at Har Sinai? Wasn't there death all the way up until this point? So what would have changed when Klal Yisrael receives the Torah suddenly? Nobody has to die. We know that when Adam HaRishon was being banished from Gan Eden, he was told that if you eat from this tree of knowledge of good and evil, but it's too much, you're certainly going to die. So that means there was death in the world from that time. Why would it suddenly go off? That now the Chet Egel brings back Misa, brings back death, and now we have to purify it with the Parah Adumah. So in order to understand the answer to this question, we really have to go back to the very beginning of time. And we have to understand and ask ourselves, what was the Tachlis Habriya? What was the purpose of creation mitchila, from the very beginning? Did the Ribbono Shel Olam have in mind that a person is going to die from the time that we were created, when Adam HaRishon was walking around in Gan Eden? Or is it possible that HaKadosh Baruch Hu never intended for man to die at all, rather live a lifetime of eternity in which they will be able to serve Hashem? Was a person always going to have death looming in their life, knowing that time is running out, I better make sure I make the best out of my years in this world? Or did the Ribbono Shel Olam have faith in mankind, in Adam HaRishon and Chav, and anyone that would come from them, that they're so spiritually attuned and inclined, and they're so much in love with the Ribbono Shel Olam and His mitzvahs and His Torah, that they should spend their entire life for nitzchias, for all of eternity, serving the Ribbono Shel Olam? They don't need to die at all, rather just keep serving and being Oved Hashem. Which one is the way that Hashem set up the world? The Nefesh HaChaim, Rav Chaim Volozhin's masterful sefer on Tselem Elokim, on Avodas Ha'adam Ba'alamai, what is a person's mission here in this world, what does it mean to be created in the image of God, and many other relevant topics to our Avodas Hashem, he brings fairly in the beginning of this sefer an idea that is going to enlighten us in this area. And the Nefesh HaChaim explains the following. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam HaRishon, man was perfect in his inception. Man was perfect in his creation. He was not lacking anything. He was more of a malach, more of an angel than he was a human being. And he was kuloi tov, he was completely good, absorbed in goodness, in kedusha, in tahara. That was the life of man. And Adam HaRishon, together with his wife Chava, they were supposed to live a life that would be like this eternally. And there was no reason for there to be death in this world. Man doesn't need death, as we will discuss shortly why we need it in this world. Man was able to commune with Hashem. He was able to be Dovid, to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, able to see the value in every single mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, and every challenge that would be presented them, it would have been easy for mankind to overcome them, because when you are kulo toiv, when you are completely good, nothing will sidetrack you, nothing will get in the way. You will not get confused. You will not have any gray area in your life. Everything is clear and pure, and you will live exactly the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to live in this world. But there's a caveat with all of this creation. The only way that man is going to exist properly in the world of Hashem is if we are able to employ our midah of bechira, of free will. Only if we will make decisions, only if we will have challenges that we are forced to choose from one side of the coin to the other, only if we'll have to dig inside of ourselves and make a decision that sometimes is very hard to make, but we know that it's the right thing and we'll push away the wrong thing. And sometimes bechira means that we will actually fail in the choice. Hashem set it up that way. You are entitled to make mistakes because bechira means there are two sides of the coin. I can choose whichever side I want to. I, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know that I'm making the wrong choice, but I've given you that ability, says Hashem. So mankind needs bechira. Now when everything is clear and everything is obvious, what kind of a bechira is a person going to use? As the Nefesh HaChaim explains, if I would tell you, stick your hand in fire right now, you would tell me, are you crazy? I'm not putting my hand in fire. I'm going to burn up my hand. If I would tell you, you should see that cliff over there, run off the cliff and go peril down to your end, to your demise, as you're going to land on the rocks over there, the people would say, are you crazy? I would never do such a thing. I would rather, I want to live. I care about myself. I'm not going to throw myself off of a cliff. Chas v'chalila. When man was created in the beginning, Adam HaRishon, and his world was total clarity, everything was emes, was true. Everything was kulo tov, completely good. So therefore, the ability to make the right choice over the wrong choice was obvious. Because if all I see out of my eyes, out of my eina seichel, my mind, is what is right, is clear, and what is wrong is also clear, I will never ever make the wrong choice. Because every time that there's a wrong choice in front of me, it's like telling me, stick your hand in the fire. I don't do such things. Every time there's a challenge and the other side of the scales is trying to weigh me down to do the wrong thing, I said, that's jumping off a cliff. I would never do that. Adam HaRishon's bechira would be very limited. Nevertheless, that's the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created him. So he won't grow exponentially with every decision that he makes because it's clear the decision he will do, which is fine. That's the way that Hashem created the world. However, there's really got to be stronger bechira. And the only way there can be stronger levels of bechira where I'm going to struggle and fight it out inside of myself is if there really is something that's trying to pull me in the negative direction. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends in the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, the place of paradise, where it's just Adam and Chava and the Ribono Shel Olam. He sends in a Nachash HaKadmaini, the evil serpent, who is the manifestation of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination, of the force in this world that is trying to make a man make mistakes in his decision process. Comes along the Nachash, and he comes slyly over to Adam HaRishon and he says, listen, Adam, it's amazing, you're a tzaddik, you're like a malach, like an angel. Even the angels are bowing down to you, they're calling you Elohim, they think that you're God. Pretty incredible, you're really a lofty soul and a fellow. However, you know that Hashem made this world for bechira, for free will. And in the world of bechira, what kind of choice do you have if everything is obvious and clear in front of you? You're always going to make the right choice. So you're never really struggling. You're never really working hard. You're never trying to figure out what is right over wrong. In your eyes, it's always a b'charta b'chaim. You're always choosing life. You always know what is right. Now, can a person really grow if they're in such a situation? Can a person really ascend higher heights in their dveikis, in their level of closeness to Hashem, if everything is obvious to them? We know that Chazal tell us, lefum tzara agra, according to the effort that one must expend, the tsar, the anguish, the fight, the pain that they have to instill inside, the struggles that they have, that will be the agra, that will be the reward that they're going to get. So you who are not doing anything in the world of tsara, of fighting, what kind of an agra, what kind of reward do you really get? Do you grow exponentially when you make the right choice? Do you find tremendous favor in the eyes of Hashem when you do what is right in His eyes? Are you bringing nachas ruach liyotzoi? Are you bringing a pleasant fragrance of avodas Hashem, of elevation of the soul to Hashem when you do what is right? Says the Nachash, it can't be. Because if the secret to spiritual growth is the more pain, the more gain, well, you're going through no pain. And you're not making any effort. And you don't have to squeeze out the koiches, the potential that is in you, because it's all at the forefront, because every decision is obvious for you to make. So I have an idea for you, Adam. You know that tree, the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told you don't eat from? Remember that tree? There's a reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want you to eat from that tree. Because He knows that on the day that you eat from that tree, suddenly mixed inside of you is going to become toiv and ra, good and bad. And then you're going to have to do lafum tzar, you're going to have to fight it out within yourself to make the right decision. And as a result of that, you're going to grow exponentially so great, Hashem's a little bit worried you're going to be too close to Him. And Hashem wants to remain the ultimate melech, malchei malachim, the king of all kings in this world. He doesn't want anybody getting too close. So it's not that there's anything wrong in eating from the tree. It's only from Hashem's perspective, but from your perspective, you have everything to gain. As a result of eating from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will fuse together the good and the bad inside of you. You'll now start to fight out the decisions to be able to make the right choice over the wrong choice, but you are Adam HaRishon. Your neshama is loftier than any other creature in this world, and certainly you will continue to make the right choice over the wrong one, but it will come with much more effort. And in the schus of the effort that you're going to make, lefum tzara agra, will come the great reward that you're going to receive. So if I were you, says the Nachash, this is how the Yetzer Hara always works, if I were you, I would encourage you greatly to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because therein lies your secret to success in the spiritual world, and the striving and the cleaving that you have to the Ribbono Shel Olam. Adam HaRishon now eats. He hears the trickery and the advice of the Nachash. The seduction of the Nachash is so cunning and sly in his eyes. He says, you know what? It's a good idea that he's making. It's a very good point. I didn't think about this. If my goal in this world is to become closer to Hashem, it's the only way to become closer. And he eats from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, and suddenly all of the Ra, all the evil in this world, which was once external, not a part of Adam HaRishon, it becomes part and parcel, lost, mixed up inside of him. And now it's very difficult to make the right choice. And the Nachash lied to him, which is what the Yetzer Hara always does to a person. The Yetzer Hara convinces you, if you'll just do this Avera, life is going to be so much better. If you'll speak Lashon Hara about this person over here, you're going to be so much happier, until everybody hates you as a result of the Lashon Hara. If you'll just cheat a little bit with the IRS and the taxes so you can bring home some more money, you'll give more to tzedakah. What can be better than that? It's all great until you get caught and you get put behind bars. If you'll just be sevei your taivas, you'll fulfill your desires in this particular illicit relation over here, you'll be relaxed, you'll become, everything will be great, until, of course, Rahman al-Islam, you get caught and destroy your marriage, destroy your family, destroy everything. The Yetzer Hara is always trying to convince us that every sin you have to gain, nothing to lose. Until you commit the sin, then you lose everything. Says the Ribbono Shel Olam, once that Adam ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, what ends up happening to him? He destroys himself and he destroys the world around him. And as a result of that, Ra, evil and bad, is now mekukal. It is destroyed inside of the essence of man, of Adam. And now he has a different tafkid, a different purpose in this world. And that is, go through your life, try your hardest to make the right choices. At the end of the day, ein tzaddik ba'aretz shelo yechta. There's no such thing as a fully righteous man that never sinned in this world. You're going to be walking around with some blemish of shmutz, of the sin that you committed. And as a result of that, you will need to cleanse and purify yourself in this world. How are you going to do that? Yeah, you'll do tshuva, of course. And yes, you'll learn Torah. And yes, you'll daven to Hashem. And you will serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meyodecha. You'll serve Hashem with everything you have. But at the end of the day, everyone will be left with a shemitz, with at least some remains of the impurity of the Yetzer Hara and the Ra and the bad and the evil and the sin that is in them. You can't wipe it out completely in this world. Even with Yisurim, with suffering and the like, something is still going to be clinging to the film of your neshama. So what has to happen at this point? Well, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu punished man with. Once you eat from the Eitz Hadas, you must be banished from Gan Eden. Why? Because in Gan Eden there is a tree of Chaim, the Eitz HaChaim. And if you'll eat from the Eitz HaChaim, at this point you will live forever. What's wrong with living forever? That's great. That was Hashem's original plan. Man should live eternally serving Him. But the problem is, once that you ingested the Yetzer Hara inside of you, and once that you have the residue of sin with you all of your life, and when you go through life, you have to get rid of it, the only way to get rid of it now is if you're going to die. The immersion in the kever, in the grave, the decomposition that a person will take in the caver, in the grave over there, whatever their body's going to have to go through to decompose and to be eaten by, you'll excuse my French over here, by all the maggots and the bugs that are there, the sitting 6 feet on the ground and going through all of that, and the loss of the body of the goof, that itself will purify you from whatever schmutz it is that you have and you carry it around with you in this world. If you'll eat from the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, and you will live forever, you will never be able to reach a point of true purification, and you'll always live with Ra, with the Yetzer Hara. You'll always live with impurity. You will always live with a impairment, a spiritual impairment, never being truly healed from the mistakes of eating from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. So Hashem banishes Adam HaRishon from the Gan Eden. He sends him far away. And he says, Ki b'yoyim achalcha mimenu mois tamus. From the day that you end up eating from the tree of knowledge, you will certainly die. Says the Nefesh HaChaim, Lo yishayin klal v'oinesh. It's not that this is a curse or even a punishment. Kimi pi el yoyin lo yiteitze rois, because from the mouth of Hashem no bad comes. Hashem's not cursing Adam HaRishon over here. He's not punishing Adam HaRishon over here. Ela perusha, what does it mean? Shayidei achalcha mimenu, since that you ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, tis arev bicha hazu mashal hara. The impurities, the poison of Ra, of evil in this world, has been mixed up and ingested inside of you. There is no other way to remove this from you in order to give good to you and benefit you in the end, in the world to come. unless it would come through misa, death, and the equal and the decomposing in the kever, in the grave. Says the Nefesh HaChaim something fascinating, and that is that death itself is not a punishment. It is not a klala. It looks like from the Torah that it's a curse and a punishment. No, it's not. It's a chesed of the Ribbono Shel Olam. Since that you ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, you got yourself stuck. You have all this impurity inside of you. You got to get rid of it. How can you get rid of it? Tshuva, yes, it helps. Yisurim, suffering, it helps. Torah burns it out, it helps. Davening and getting closer, it helps. But there's always residue that's going to remain. The only way to get rid of it is death. It's a separation of the body from the soul. And once that the soul goes through that it goes through that transition into the world to come, it goes through the decomposing that will take place in the kever, and the body now is meaningless. The neshama lifts itself up and shines and radiates. All of the ra is wiped away, and the neshama is able to commune directly with Hashem. And therefore, Misa, death, had to come to the world. No choice. They actually say over that maybe, 100 years ago or so, 80 years ago, in the cemetery in Vilna, where the great and the holy Vilna Gaon was buried, and the Vilna Gaon, by the way, is the Rabbi of Rav Chaim Volozhin, the author of the Nefesh HaChaim. He was the main disciple. The Vilna Gaon was laid to rest in the Vilna cemetery, and one day they decided that they're going to build like a soccer stadium right over the cemetery. And the Jewish community in Vilna, they fought fearlessly with the government. You must let us exhume the bodies of the tzaddikim that are buried here in the cemetery. You can't build a field over them. And so the Chevra Kedisha and the Askanim and the people in the community and around the world, they began arguing with the Vilna government, and in the end, Baruch Hashem, they said they gave them permission to exhume many of the bodies from that cemetery. Of course, the Vilna Gaon was first and foremost. Now, when the Chevra Kedisha came to the cemetery, it's a very frightening and a holy process, that which is done when you exhume a body, especially one of that stature of the Vilna Gaon, and one that's been in there for such a long time already. They began to dig into the ground. And of course, they assume that they're going to find the bones of the Vilna Gaon in the kever, and they'll have everything ready to put them into like a box, and that they will carry them off to the next cemetery in Vilna, where they're going to lay them to rest once again. However, as they dug and they dug and they dug, and they got down 6 feet under where the Vilna Gaon was buried, to their great astonishment and their shock, they found that the Vilna Gaon's body was completely intact. No decomposition. His skin had not worn out. There were no bones that were showing. Even the hair on his head and his beard were still in place. And the way that the story is told is that even the water that was in the beard of the Vilna Gaon from the Tahara process, before they lay a body to rest, it goes to a purification in this world where there are buckets of water that are poured over it almost like a mikvah, and the water was still in the beard of the Vilna Gaon. Because someone who lives in this world on a zamadrega, on such a level where they are kulai neshama, completely ruchnius. The Vilna Gaon, we know he only slept 2 hours a night, 4 half-an-hour intervals. And the Vilna Gaon barely ate anything. A piece of bread that was soaked in water, he would just drink it down, so to speak, so he didn't have to enjoy the pleasures of this world. And he was learning, if not 18, 20 hours a day, the rest of the time was just for davening and for whatever his bodily needs were. So the bulk of his life was spent plumbing the depths of Torah, of Avodah, of Tefillah, of Ruchnius, of Yerushalayim. You read his commentaries on Mishlei and the like. The man in Shir Shivim, he was in a different planet of Ruchnius than anybody down here in this world. And because of his neshama was so great, there was no sin that was sticking to him, even to his body, and therefore the body was just like clothing to the neshama. And although that every person has to die because of the original sin of Adam HaRishon, there's nothing that you can do. Everybody has to die. The Vilna Gaon died, and yet his body stayed intact. The neshama left seamlessly into the world to come, and they were able to pick up his remains and bury them elsewhere in Vilna, in the cemetery that he's found in right now. The more ruchni, the more decisions of bechira that a person makes in the positive, in the right, and he doesn't do what is wrong, so the more the goof just becomes like a vessel, a vehicle for the neshama to be able to perform its deeds of mitzvahs, of chesed, of rachmanis, of learning Torah, of davening here in the world that we are a part of. Years ago, I remember the Rav Scheinberg Zatzal, who was one of the great Rosh Yeshivas of the generation. He's the one, if anybody ever saw pictures or you knew him personally, he wore about 100 pairs of tzitzis. The tzitzis cotton, nobody knew exactly what the reason was. It was between him and the Rabbi Shalom. So he was like a mound of tzitzis, and he wore tefillin all day long. Of course, during the week on Shabbos, not. He barely ate. I was in his house, Baruch Hashem, more than once, and I saw he barely ate a little bit of tuna, maybe a little bit of an egg, not much. His life was steeped in Torah and mitzvahs and learning and Kedusha. Daven nates every single day on Shabbos. He didn't speak any extra words, only Lashon HaKodesh, only a little bit here and there. And he was a man of Kedusha, of holiness and of sanctity. One year, when I was still learning in Baltimore, he came for about a week or so in the summertime. And it was a very, very big excitement for the community. Such a tzaddik like Rav Scheinberg is coming to Baltimore, and we tried to do whatever we could to get close to him during that time. So they invited everyone to their house to daven for Shabbos, and by Shalosh Shudas, they made a community Shalosh Shudas in the house where he was staying. And I can never forget this scene. I come to the house, Shalosh Shudas, Shabbos afternoon, a blistering summer day in Baltimore, which means about 90 degrees outside, plus 90 to 100% humidity. If anybody knows what that feels like, that means you just open the door to your house and you break out in a sweat. And if you walk, for sure it's sweating. And if you would be in a house where there would be no air conditioning, it's so stifling hot, you almost can't breathe. And sweat is dripping down from your brow and everywhere in your throughout your body, your clothes, everything is getting wet with sweat. We go to the house for Shalosh Shudas. And for some reason, the air conditioning is not on. Now, I believe it was because he was probably sensitive to air and he didn't want to catch a cold, perhaps. The air conditioning was not on in the house. It was a sweltering day. 90, 100 degrees, 100% humidity. Just walking there, we were already drenched from the heat and the perspiration. We come into the house thinking we're going to cool off. No. It is boiling in that house. Rav Scheinberg is sitting at the front of the table. There were probably about 120, if not more, people that packed into a small dining room. So you have heat, humidity, and body heat. Now it is boiling. Rav Scheinberg is sitting at the head of the table. There is a fan in the room pointing in the direction of Rav Scheinberg, but is actually pointing away from him, so it's not even blowing on him. Now every man that's standing in this room is buckets of sweat are pouring down from their brow. There's Rabbanim and the people taking their jackets off and drinking like it's going out of style. Scheinberg's sitting at the table. Everybody's watching him. And he's giving a drasha. And there was one of the most unbelievable things that I ever saw in my life. A man that's wearing about 100 pairs of wool tzitzis, sitting in and a jacket on top of that, sitting in a house that is way beyond 100 degrees and you can barely breathe and everybody's dripping sweat. There was not one bead of sweat that was coming down from the brow of Rav Scheinberg. He wasn't uncomfortable. He wasn't bothered by the heat. He was functioning as normal, as if it was temperate, perfect. The air was crisp, clean, and cool. Not 1 ounce of tsar, of anguish or pain from the heat and the stifling humidity like everybody else in the room. I was standing next to a friend of mine when Shalosh Shudas was over and we walked out. He said, "Did you see the nace?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "He wasn't." I said, "I know." He wasn't sweating not once because Rav Scheinberg was not his body. He was not the room that was sweltering. Rav Scheinberg was neshama, he was ruchnis, he was Torah, he was on a different madrega, he was connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And therefore the guf was just the kli, the vessel, the clothing for the neshama that allowed him to do his mitzvahs here in this world. We who are much more ingrained in the physical, we feel the heat. Rav Scheinberg didn't feel anything. Adam HaRishon, when he was originally created, it was all ruchnius. The body was just a vessel for the neshama. Once he ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your body now has become too much involved in your life. The Eitzar is mixed up inside of you. Now the only way to remove the impurity is Misa. Ve'ikol HaKever, you have to die and you have to decompose in the grave. That's all that's going to help. And therefore, death was not a function of punishment and klala and curse. Rather, like he quotes over here in the notes from the Vilna Gaon, it was like a chesed from Hashem. A chesed that allows a person now to be redeemed and purified from this world so they can move on purely into the world to come. And that's the way the world was going to run. And it did until Maimed Har Sinai. When Klal Yisrael stood by Har Sinai, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and we heard the voice of Hashem, and we were lifted up to the level of Nevi'im, of prophets like Moshe Rabbeinu, and we heard the second, Lo Yeh Elohim Echad, there should be no foreign gods in front of you, and our neshamas had histapkus, they had the connection with Hashem like never before, and we said Nasa v'Nishma, and the Malachim came and they gave us 2 crowns, one for Nasa, one for Nishma, and we were elevated to a level of like malachim, of angels. Say Chazal, you should know at that moment we reverted back to the level of existence that Adam HaRishon was on in Gan Eden before the Chet HaEgel, which means that Misa, that the obligation for a person to die in this world, it was nifka, it went off at that time. And we were once again supposed to live ad bias goyal tzedek till Mashiach will come, nitzchis, eternity, without having to die and go into the caver, into the grave, and go through all of that. Because once that man reaches the level once again of purity, where the Ra is outside of us, the Yitzhar disappeared at that moment, the Kedusha and the emes of Torah was so clear and so strong. The Ra, the evil is gone, our Bechira changes, and we are once again like an Adam Rishon. We had gone through so much in history already, so much to get to our Sinai. Hashem said, you know what, you deserve to be on the level of Adam HaRishon, where there's no longer Yitzhar inside of you. It's gone. The Zuama, the impurities of the Yitzhar is gone. Your Kula Yitzhar Tov, completely good. Only seeing the good, only wanting the good, only wanting to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your life. And it was supposed to remain like that. And Klal Yisrael would have looked a totally different nation. A nation of Kedusha, a nation of Torah, a nation of Emes, a nation of Torah, a nation of Avodas Hashem, a nation that's only cleaving to get closer and closer to the Rebbe, every single thing that they do. And it was all like that until Chet HaEgel. Once that they fell into the sin of the golden calf, and they began dancing around like Avodah Zarah, like idol worship. And they began professing their adoration to a golden calf. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you just lost the status that you were on. You went from the highest of heights of being like malachim, like angels, like Adam HaRishon, Koydem HaChet. You have fallen down to the level that man was on before, and guess what? You've just brought Misa v'ikol hakever, back into the world. You no longer can live forever as a pure person. You now bring in the schmutz of the Yetzer Hara back once again. It's mixed up inside of you. Decisions will be more difficult to make, and you, no matter how much of a tzaddik you're going to be, some kind of a schmutz and residue will always cling to you, and you must die. Because in the death will come the kapara, will come the atonement and the rectification of whatever mistakes you made here in this world. And therefore, Chet HaEgel destroyed the perfect world that Klal Yisrael climbed to at the time of the giving of the Torah. Says the Maharal, that's what it comes along with the PARAH ADUMAH. Let the mother, let the PARAH ADUMAH come and clean up the mess of her son, her child who came along and sullied the king's palace. Klal Yisrael was standing in the king's palace. Maimed Sinai was an experience of revelation like no other. We're standing, we're hearing the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No other nation ever heard the voice of Hashem. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I'm here, and you're here. Let's leave it like this. But comes along this Egel, comes along the people, and they begin coloring on the walls of Har Sinai. They begin turning over the cups by the foot of Har Sinai. They begin throwing water back in the face of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and they begin being mekalkel. They're destroying the kedusha of the moment that existed. Hashem said, what a mess! And now Misa, now death has come back to the world. So therefore, now that this created death once again in the world, the PARAH ADUMAH, the mother, the cow herself, let her come and clean up the mess of Misa, of death that is here once again. And therefore, the PARAH ADUMAH has the koyach, has the power to rectify and purify and atone and remove the tumah, the impurity, and bring the tahara and the kedusha of a person back who became tamei meis, who touched a body that was dead, because that person is only dead because of the Chet HaEgel, and therefore the PARAH ADUMAH cleans it all up and gets rid of all of it. And therefore that is our continued struggle until this day. There is Yetzer Hara inside of us. There is battling that we have to go through. And that's our bechir, that's our world of free will and choice. And yet, as we know, Rav Tat speaks about this at great length in his beautiful book, his Sefer on Bechira. Every single decision that you make in your life to do the right thing, it transforms you, it elevates you, it changes the course of where you're going in this world. And every single decision that you make, the wrong side of the coin, when you embrace the Ra, the evil of this world and the Yetzer Hara, it will destroy you and bring you down and change the course of your life, Rahman Azan, in the wrong place. We are the key holders of our bechir, of our free will. And we are entitled, like the Rambam writes, nobody will force us, and nobody will push us, nobody will pull us in any direction. We and we alone are responsible, that the reshus and this sunnah b'yana adam, permission is given into everybody's hands to make the choices that they want and do what is right over wrong. Choose kedusha over tuma. Choose toiv over ra. Chayim over maves. Bracha over klala. That is all up to us. And therefore our mission, our job, since the time of the Chet HaEgel, is to make sure that we are using our bechira in the right way, trying to conquer and overcome the crafty arguments and seduction of the Yetzer Hara, cling to the Yetzer Tov, cling to our neshamas, and serve HaKadosh Baruch in a way that really is a nachas ruach, is a pleasure to Hashem. I want to leave you off with one last story over here. This goes back, I believe, about 16 years ago or so. I was fortunate to be very friendly and close to a Choshev Yid that lived here in LA by the name of Rav Mordechai Beyer Zatzal. He was a Talmid Chacham of par excellence. He was very big into halacha, and he was able to go through many different areas of halacha successfully, and learn them and know them and understand them, and paskin as well. But he had a great appreciation for machshava and musar also. And he asked me one time, he saw that I was sitting in a kollel by myself, and he asked me, do you have time to learn with me? I said, Rabbi Beir, I should be learning from you. He said, no, I would like to learn something. You've learned Nefesh HaChaim before. Could you learn Nefesh HaChaim with me? And I said to him, it'll be my pleasure. It'll be an honor to learn with you. And so I believe at the time we made up to learn twice a week Nefesh HaChaim. And we went through, and Nefesh HaChaim is a very mystical sefer. I'm not an expert in the world of mysticism at all. And every time that we would get to certain passages in the Zohar, I would try to explain them as basic as I could. And it was never really enough for him, and he would go into the Zohar itself after we would learn, and he would pull out the nuggets of wisdom that were there, and he would come back and he would tell me, you know, the Zohar really means this, and it says this, and we were complimenting each other in the learning. We got to this area of the Nefesh HaChaim. We're speaking about eating from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, and really man was supposed to live on forever, and there was never supposed to be Misa, death in this world. However, once that he ate and the Ra was mixed up inside of him, so HaKadosh had no choice. He had no choice of the matter but to bring and inflict Misa, death into this world. And we spoke about these words in the Nefesh HaChaim and the way that the Vilna Gaon explains as well, and that is that death is not a curse and a punishment. Rather, it is a chesed. It's an act of kindness from Hashem, because it's only through that we will be able to clean away the imperfections that we left of ourselves in this world. And this was like an eye-opening idea to him. He used to take notes in his sefer, and I remember watching him write feverishly this idea: death is not a punishment, it's a chesed from Hashem. We learned that day, and this was just a few days before Tisha B'Av, and the next time we were supposed to learn was, I believe, the day or two after Tisha B'Av. On the day of Tisha B'Av itself, Erev Tisha B'Av, Rabbi Beir, who was managing certain properties, he went to collect the rent from a certain resident of an apartment that he had rented out. And unfortunately, when he came to the door to collect the money, it was a very unwell tenant that was living there, and he opened fire on Rabbi Beir, and he killed him in cold blood. Levaya took place that year on Tisha B'Av. It was a tragedy beyond belief. Nobody could imagine, leaving behind a wife and a chashuva family of beautiful children. After his Petira, they began looking through some of his svarim that he'd been learning up until that time. And they found the Nefesh HaChaim that we learned together. And they found in these frightening and eerie words that we were exactly at this place. And he had written, death is not a punishment, it is a chesed from Hashem. As we're saying over here, it cleans away the impurities. And then it says the next day that we're supposed to learn together, which of course we never made it to. May his neshama, Rav Mordechai ben Daniel, may it have an aliyah. His yortzeit is coming up very soon. And this was a man that was inspired by this idea. The idea of that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us through a lot in this world. He created us in Gan Eden, and in Gan Eden was supposed to be nitzchias, living forever and ever and ever. And then we lost the schus when we ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. But then we regained that merit when we ended up standing by our Sinai. We became like malachim, like angels. The punishment of Misa, of death, goes off. But sadly, Klal Yisrael could only remain on that level for 40 days until once again they listened to the trickery of the Yetzer Hara, and they danced around the golden calf, and they brought all of that impurity back inside of them, and then death comes back to the world. And as a result of that, we have something called PARAH ADUMAH. PARAH ADUMAH brings about Kedusha, brings about Torah, brings about the purification from Misa. And that's the mashal of Rashi over here. Let the mother come and clean up the mess that her son, that her child made. Now, we don't have PARAH ADUMAH in the world anymore. So we can't call our mothers to come along and clean up our mess of the impurities that we do. We don't have that schus, we don't have that merit anymore. So what does it mean for us? For us it means we are responsible to clean up our own mess in this world. Whatever mistakes we have made, whatever averas we have jumped into, whatever impurities we have allowed to cling to our neshamas, even though, as the Ramchal writes in Derech Hashem, the neshama is not affected by the impurity of sin. This is a great hope that each and every one of us has. You have to keep in mind, although that the impurities of sin will cling to the neshama, it never penetrates the neshama. The neshama is kulo toiv. It's tzelem Elokim. Hashem's not affected by sin. Hashem is not affected by impurity, and therefore the neshama, which is a chelik Elokam Yimal, a piece of the rebellion, it will not be affected, but the residue of sin can cling to the covering of the neshama, and that we have to get rid of. So we have to come and clean up the mess. And how do we clean up the mess in this world? Tshuva, Maisim Toivim, Kedusha, learning Torah. Torah itself is the greatest schus that a person can have to cleanse away the impurities of sin that are there. Davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, doing mitzvahs, doing chesed and the like, emulating the ways of Hashem, the more that you become like Hashem, the more HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, you're gonna commune together with the Shekhinah. And therefore our mission is, let's clean up our own mess. Let's take it upon ourselves. Get out the shmata, get out those new kind of things that they have today, the new cleaning agents that it can go onto the wall and it cleans off paint, and it cleans off scribbling, and it cleans off ink. Take one of those sponges, magic eraser sponge, clean it off. We can do that today. We have the koyach. Hashem gave us the Torah. He entrusted us with the Torah. He gave us davening. He gave us a siddur. He gave us a mouth that can speak to Hashem whenever we want. We can get involved in mitzvahs. The more difficult the mitzvah is, lafum tzara agra, that will be the reward. What's the greatest reward? The greatest reward is that we leave this world after 120 years, like a Vilna Gaon, like a Rav Scheinberg, where the body was just a casing for the neshama. But the body was not the ikar, was not the main thing. The main thing was the neshama that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me. I'll use it to serve you, Hashem. I'll use it to learn your Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll use it to do tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll use it to be able to be a source of pride and a nachas to you. And in that zechusim, Yetz Hashem, even in a world without a PARAH ADUMAH, to cleanse us from our impurities, Hashem gave us bechira and our free will, which Hashem entrusted in mankind from the beginning of time. We'll use it in the right way, and we'll be able to cleanse and to purify ourselves. And the body will just be a vehicle and a vessel to serve our neshama, so that our neshama can truly serve Hashem. Have a wonderful week, a wonderful Shabbos, and in Yetz Hashem, we should all continue to grow in our service of the Rabbi Shalom.